Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Car Doctor radio program and podcast. Always great guests, and we have one coming up right now, so stay tuned.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is John Paul. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Affairs and Traffic Safety for AAA Northeast, also known as AAA's Car Doctor. And electric vehicles still are not the highest number of vehicles on the road right now, somewhere between 4% here on the East Coast, maybe 8 or 9% out in California, but certainly electric vehicles everywhere I look, I seem to see an electric vehicle. And there are some concerns about, is the grid capable of sustaining electric vehicles? And, as they become more popular, will the grid be able to support this? And kind of across the country, we've seen rolling brownouts in air conditioning season, things like that. So there is a bit of stress on the grid, but there's a new app that might be able to help. And with us is Joseph Vellone. He is the North American head of EVEnergy. Joseph, good day and welcome to this AAA conversation.
Good morning, John Paul. Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
So, is there a concern? Is there enough electricity to handle electric vehicles as they start to grow? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I think the concerns that you sort of mentioned are definitely valid concerns, and I think the key point is that electric vehicles don't need to be a problem for the power grid if their charging is properly managed. So if EV charging is not managed in any sort of intelligent way, then yes, we're going to start to see strains on local parts of the power grid, in areas with higher levels of EV adoption, when all those vehicles are charging, at the same time, potentially during peak hours. And peak hours tend to be kind of in the early evening, when factories and businesses are still running, folks are coming home, they're turning on all of their appliances at home, whether it's plugging in and charging their EV, turning on the air conditioning as they get home, turning on lights, running dryers, other pieces of equipment. All of that can really sort of add to strain on the power grid that could cause a brownout or a blackout. And in certain parts of the country where heating is largely electric, we also see peaks or sort of peak demand during the morning hours as well, when electric heaters are running, sort of warming up homes as people are waking up. So when EVs are sort of charging during those times, that can actually cause a problem for the grid if it's not managed. And I think it's important to kind of put into context that an electric vehicle consumes about as much electricity as the average American home. So you can kind of think about all these EVs, sort of being added, to streets and neighborhoods across America, and it's almost like doubling, the number of houses on a given street or in a given neighborhood, as you see more and more, Teslas, Ford F-150s, and other vehicles. So EVs do consume a lot of electricity, but I think the good news is that the technology already exists to manage their charging. And if that charging, by the way, is properly managed, EVs can actually become an asset to the power grid rather than a liability. And that's what we try to do at EVEnergy, and that's what we're doing together with National Grid through the Charge Smart program.
Yeah, talking with the folks from National Grid back some time ago, they're pretty confident that they're in pretty good shape, but they also said that, smart charging is something that's going to help. And I recently did about a 1,600-mile drive from the south up here to the north, and a lot more electric vehicles, a lot more Teslas, not just Teslas, but certainly Chevrolet Bolts and Ford Mustangs, and also an electric tractor trailer, which I thought was sort of interesting. The first one I had seen from Nicola that was running down the road in Maryland, and just the idea that we are seeing this electric vehicle adoption. And I think what happens is with most people, Your neighbor goes out and buys whether it's a Chevy Bolt or a Tesla, and you take it for a ride and you go, wow, this is pretty impressive. And you're like, maybe my next car will be an electric vehicle. So tell us how your app can help consumers charge smarter and maybe charge without putting as much strain on the environment at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Charge Smart Massachusetts app that we've built for National Grid allows EV drivers to charge smarter in a very, very easy, kind of hassle-free way. They download the app, they log into their National Grid account, and then they just connect their vehicle wirelessly. The great thing about electric vehicles is that most of them have got internet connections embedded into the vehicle. EVs are very sort of high tech, and they've all actually just got SIM cards, that same thing that you've got in your mobile phone. And that connects them to the internet. That allows us to connect the vehicle and collect its charging data in a secure and anonymized way. And National Grid has come up with this wonderful sort of incentive for EV drivers in Massachusetts that just gives them cash back for charging during off-peak hours. And National Grid defines off-peak as hours starting at 9 p.m. at night and going overnight all the way into the early afternoon up until 1 p.m. the next day. So you have a very nice long window during which National Grid will pay you 5 cents back for every kilowatt hour of charging you do off-peak during the summer months, June to September, and then 3 cents per kilowatt hour back during the non-summer months. And that's all you have to do as an EV driver. And then really, it's kind of up to you to, just sort of set a timer, in your vehicle to start charging at, 9 p.m. or midnight or whenever it is, or just go into your, garage before you go to bed, just, sort of plug in the car, start charging. Then it should be ready by the morning. And that's all that's required. No special hardware, nothing to install. Just use the embedded internet connection in your vehicle to send that anonymized data to EVEnergy so that we can pass it on to National Grid. And then customers will just see the cash back on their electricity bill every month. And this program has been going for a few months now, and we're seeing really nice chunky savings. Customers getting sort of $10 to $15 off their energy bill each month by charging off peak, which is great.
So this is one of those things that somebody might say, it's $10 a month. Is it worth it? Do I really want to go through it? But it kind of goes back to sort of, I walk down the street on a Monday morning and there's a $10 bill sitting on the sidewalk, and I walk by and I pick it up. And the next month I walk down the same street, there's another $10 bill. By the third month, I'm starting to look for the $10 bill. And this is very similar to that idea that, yeah, I can save a little bit of money. Is it going to be a ton of money over the course of a year? No, but if I can put $10 or $20 in my pocket every month, that's a significant savings, and it allows me maybe to go do something else that's maybe more fun than paying my electric bill.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, in the current economy, with inflation as high as it is, I think what we're seeing is that Americans are trying to save in any way that they can. And if your utility is going to just, sort of give you money back for your electric vehicle charging, I think for a lot of folks, it's just been a no-brainer. And, $15 a month is not insignificant. That adds up to as much as like $180 per year. And by the way, National Grid will give all of its customers an additional one-time $50 bonus when they enroll in this program. So, you're talking about over $200, in a given calendar year, off the charging that you were going to do anyway. Imagine going to the gas station and getting a $10 bill back every time, you fill up at the pump, or a $5 bill. That's great, right? You had to fill up anyway. And this way you're just getting money back. So I think it's a fantastic program that National Grid is rolling out. I think it's no surprise that we've seen an incredible level of demand already just since rolling this out. Just sort of to the public last month. We've got over 1,500 customers already enrolled, and we're seeing those numbers sort of tick up every day. And we're planning for up to 11,000 customers to join over the coming months.
And right now, it's being rolled out in Massachusetts with National Grid. How do you see this expanding, maybe throughout New England, the East Coast, and across the country?
Yeah, it's a great question. So EVEnergy, works with a lot of utilities across the country, not just National Grid. National Grid's one of our partners, and we're very happy to be rolling this out in Massachusetts. But there are a number of other utilities across the country who are rolling out similar programs. So just across the state border in Connecticut, we work with United Illuminating, the major utility there, to run a similar program, actually, again, app-based, completely, wireless, just connects to your vehicle. And that's one actually where the utility is offering customers $100 to enroll and $50 per month during the summer months to not charge during peak events. So it's a little bit different. It's not sort of a daily thing. You'll get a push notification on your phone through the app, letting you know, hey, this afternoon, the grid is under a lot of strain. Please don't charge your vehicle. And as long as you don't charge your vehicle, over the course of the month when you're getting these alerts, and you just, wait till the event is over. And EVEnergy, by the way, can automatically schedule your charging if you want till after, that event happens, so that it's sort of a set it and forget it thing. You don't even really need to take any action. You'll get $50 a month, which is absolutely great. We see other utilities, across the country rolling out these kinds of programs. We do a lot of work actually in the South and the Midwest, where maybe folks don't think about EVs being sort of as widespread maybe as in California. But the point that you made earlier is a really good one. We're seeing EV adoption now being sort of still pretty localized, at least in certain places. Look, California, pretty much no matter wherever you go, you see EVs everywhere. But we work with actually a utility in Alabama Power. You don't think of Alabama as maybe having a lot of EVs, and generally the state doesn't. I think they've got just over 2,000 in the entire state. But where there are EVs, they tend to be highly concentrated, because what happens is one person on the street gets an EV. And then there's this keeping up with the Joneses effect, right? Of everyone else, sort of sees that EV. You go over to your neighbor's house, you sort of, you kick the tires around, maybe you take it for a test drive. A lot of folks are realizing, oh, wow, these things are actually really nice to drive. I like performance cars, and this thing's acceleration is just, unlike anything I've ever driven before. And man, with gas prices as high as they are, I'm actually going to be saving $1,000 a year on gas. And so then suddenly, one person has got an EV, and then a year later, half the street has got an EV, right? Half the houses on the street. And then, a year after that, almost all the houses have got at least one EV. Some folks have gotten a second EV. Yeah. And there actually, you've got sort of wires, right? And transformers that are serving a specific street, a specific neighborhood. And it doesn't necessarily matter that there's only 2,000 EVs in all of Alabama. If all of them are in a specific neighborhood in Birmingham, well, then that neighborhood is going to have a blackout if all those EVs are charging at the same time and their charging isn't managed. So we're seeing, utilities like Alabama Power still rolling out these kinds of programs, trying to sort of, get ahead of the curve in terms of EV adoption, and already starting to try to find ways to, number one, turn EVs into an asset for the power grid. So actually being able to sort of optimize their charging a little bit to keep the grid balanced. And secondly, putting cash back in customers' wallets for doing the right thing for the grid, and making sure that their EV isn't sort of contributing further to grid strain.
It really makes a lot of sense. And the idea of, I was surprised how wide the window is for the off-peak charging, and really makes it pretty simple for people. And the idea that you're going to plug in your car overnight when you're not using it, it's going to charge up. You're going to start the day with basically a full tank of electrons, I guess. And the idea that, you're going to do that over and over again. And the idea that the app also helps you with the charging by kind of like you said, set it and forget it sort of thing, that no different than a smart thermostat in a house does, that kind of knows when you're there and it's not heating and cooling your house when you're not. So the idea that it's going to all work together seems to make a whole lot of sense and seems to make it easier. And also the idea that from a green consumer standpoint, the idea that you're not using electricity when it's most in demand, and maybe you're using electricity that's maybe produced in a little bit more environmentally friendly way.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the kind of next steps that we're working on with National Grid and a few of our other partner utilities. A lot of utilities now have made very big bets on renewable energy, and they are investing billions of dollars in building offshore wind farms and building big sort of solar farms as well. And there's definitely an interest in harnessing all of that renewable energy when the wind is blowing, when the sun is shining, and storing that in batteries somehow. Now, if you're a utility, you can either spend even more money on building huge sort of battery packs, sort of out in the desert or whatever in an industrial port, just kind of sitting there. Or you can just use electric vehicle batteries, right? Electric vehicles are just batteries on wheels. And what we see on the EVEnergy software platform, and we've got now over 100,000 vehicles connected to our platform who's charging, we optimize every day. We're seeing the average EV driver kind of plugged in for 12 to as much as 16 hours at a time. And particularly, kind of after this pandemic, with a lot of folks continuing to work from home, do hybrid working from home at least a few days a week. We're seeing customers kind of not necessarily unplug, first thing in the morning before their morning commute. When you're working from home, you just keep your car plugged in, right? And it's just sort of, it's just sort of still charging. And that's actually an incredible amount of flexibility that the grid now has to pump green electrons coming from a solar farm or from an offshore wind farm into electric vehicle batteries. And this is really how electric vehicles start to really become part of the solution as we transition to net zero as a country. So one of the downsides about renewable energy is, we can't control mother nature. We can't control when the wind is blowing or when the sun is shining necessarily. All we can do is try to capture those electrons when they're being generated. And of course, there's going to be businesses and households, with the lights on that need those electrons, and National Grid and other utilities will just, send those electrons directed to those houses. But, sometimes the wind is blowing so strong and for so many hours, it's actually in excess of what consumers are demanding. And so, then how do we actually sort of store those electrons for later? Well, batteries are a great way to do that. Electric vehicles are a great way to store those electrons. And that's kind of the next step of what we're looking at. And we've already started to do this in California, is actually leveraging electric vehicle batteries to store renewable energy. And most importantly, then paying drivers for allowing us to do that and do the right thing. And, in California, we're seeing, up to 93% of the electrons going into EV batteries coming from solar, 100% renewable. And with some of the utilities we work with there, customers are getting an extra $10 a month for basically charging their electric vehicles with green electrons, with renewable energy, which is great. So it's just like, it's a win for the planet, it's a win for the power grid and its stability. And it's also a win for EV drivers and their wallets. And that's what we want to start bringing to some of the utilities in New England as well.
So is the future going to be that I'm going to charge up my electric car and I don't go anywhere, and my electricity is going to go back into the grid to help support maybe my neighbor who drives more often than I do?
Yeah, that's a technology called vehicle to grid that is actually already available. Actually, the Ford F-150 Lightning is now one of the first vehicles in America to have that capability. And it just adds another sort of option, for EV drivers. Now, look, a lot of the time, you're not going to want to sell your power back to the grid. You need that to go around and drive. But there are definitely circumstances in which, a driver might want to export, some of the electricity that's in their huge EV battery. And that can be in a number of different circumstances, including a blackout. One of the things that we're working on is, can we predict an extreme weather event, right? Whether it's a hurricane, it's a nor'easter, that's going to come and knock out power. Make sure we get those electric vehicles charged to 100% before that storm hits, and then really enable that driver to power their home, with backup power from their electric vehicle, which is great. Or, on a day where the grid really needs it, maybe there's not a blackout, but, a power plant just went offline, right? There was a gas power plant that, had an outage. These things happen pretty regularly. We're not aware of them, but they happen. The grid, kind of needs extra power from somewhere in order to keep that supply and demand balanced. And yeah, we're already looking at sort of both the technology as well as the, kind of the payments and the financial incentives to, to pay a customer to export that power back to the grid when it's needed. And that's something that, we will start seeing happening, I think, within this decade on a meaningful level across America, is, sort of EV drivers starting to play more of an active role, if they want, in grid resilience, grid stability, and actually getting paid extra money for doing so.
So this is sort of, and I'm dating myself a little bit, this is sort of file sharing like Napster started out with sharing music. The idea that you're storing electricity and other people or companies can access your stored electricity, and it becomes a benefit to you. It becomes a financial incentive to you as well. But also, like you said, it's pretty easy to handle things when they're steady. It's the peaks, it's the highs and lows that become most difficult. And if we can manage the peak high and the peak low when it's not being used, that we can push more electricity out, and the peak high when there's a big demand, and it can be maybe offset with some electric vehicles that are just kind of hanging around doing nothing, and all of a sudden they become a source of electricity that can help keep the lights on, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And really, it's just going to come down to consumer choice, right? So exporting your power or vehicle to grid, or whatever you want to call it, it's not going to be for everyone. There's going to be some folks who are just uncomfortable with that. You can't pay them any amount of money to drain their EV battery. That's totally fine. Then there's going to be a set of folks who, are happy to do that, but maybe just want to do it really for their own home, right? When there's a blackout, or, whatever the case may be. We need to be able to empower them to do that with technology. And then there is going to be a set of drivers and a set of customers who, are more than happy to get paid by their utility to export their EV battery electricity, back to the grid when it's needed. They don't really mind if they're going from 100% down to 50%. That's okay. They're not going to do much driving anyway, or they could just sort of charge later. Not a big deal, and it's money in their wallets, and they're very happy to do that as well. So I think what we're really sort of focused on is sort of providing the technology and the options for all different types of EV driver to make their own choices about how they consume electricity and how they export electricity.
Yeah, it really does make a lot of sense. And if people want to find out more information about EVEnergy or the National Grid program, do you go to EVEnergy? Do you go to National Grid? What do people do?
Yeah, so if you're a National Grid customer in Massachusetts, actually, you can just go into the App Store on your iPhone or the Google Play Store on your Android, and just search for the app Charge Smart MA. That's the app that you need to download, log in with your National Grid account, connect your vehicle, and you'll just get enrolled in the program, and look out for your $50 enrollment bonus to hit your next bill. If you're not a resident of Massachusetts or a National Grid customer, definitely head to our website. It's ev.energy. That's it. To learn more about us and check if you're a resident of a state or a utility where we are working on one of these programs.
Joseph, I want to thank you for taking a little time out of your day and joining us on this AAA conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been a
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Car Doctor Radio Podcast. And remember, you can always listen live every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. on North Shore 1049. Until next time, wear your seatbelt, drive safely, be good to your car, and if you see an emergency vehicle by the side of the road, slow down or move over. It saves lives.